This is the TriSwimCoach podcast, where the most difficult leg of the triathlon becomes your friend, leaving your struggles and your competition behind you. TriSwimCoach.com, helping you to laugh at the water.
Welcome to TriSwimCoach. This is Kevin, and this is episode number 142. And in just a minute, I have a chat coming up with Coach Chris Hague, who has been on the show many times and is back again. And he has recently completed his master's degree in sports psychology. So we're going to get into the idea of motivation and how to avoid burnout in triathlon. So without further ado, here is my interview with Chris. Go out there and have a great week of training, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. I'm really excited once again to have longtime co-host of TriSwimCoach and assistant coach with TriSwimCoach, Chris Hague, on the show. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
It's going great. It has been too long. I mean, a lot has happened since I think the last time we talked was just over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When I was still back in Canada. So a lot has happened since then.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about like what your life trajectory has been and where you are now. So since you left Canada, you have now moved to Jordan.
Yep, the country of Jordan, which so I am right now at an international boarding school, back to teaching. So if you remember from, I think, the last time we chatted, I was getting my master's in sports psych. I graduated and defended my thesis. And since then, went back into the math classroom and now back teaching middle school math at an international boarding school here. It's a quirky place. It really is like stepping into like a New England prep school, but you don't have to deal with the snow or the cold winters or any of that. So it's a cool place to be. Plus, it's really close to a bunch of different triathlons and training grounds in Europe, which I'm eager to explore. And, we're a hop, skip, and a jump away from Bahrain and Dubai and Oman. So it's, believe it or not, a better place for training than I expected.
Yeah, and you don't have to deal with that Canada freezing winter too. That's a kind of an advantage.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like I while I'm still spending a lot of time on Zwift, at least I get to ride with, the sunshine on my face without having to deal with shoveling snow or shoveling myself out of the house after I hop off and, finish my workouts. So, if I want to go to the pool, I can just walk on over without having to shovel out the car, defrost the car, let the car warm up, and then drive it to the pool, only to find out that the lifeguard was snowed in and couldn't make it, and the pool was closed.
Wow.
So there's some major pluses to moving here.
Yeah, for sure. And interestingly, the Middle East has a long history of swimming, and it's a very popular sport in all over the Middle East, I know. And they kind of, from my understanding and my reading on it, they kind of look up to people that can swim long distances and swim fast and things like that.
Yeah, my coach actually, the swim coach who actually coaches at the school I work at, he was on the Saudi national team, and he's a wealth of information. He knows his stuff, and really, like, all what he's teaching the students now, because he allows me to swim with the swim team, and what he's kind of imparting and focusing on that with them is exactly in line with what we work with our athletes. So he knows his stuff. He's good.
Nice.
And so yeah, it's swimming. I think swimming and football are kind of the two major sports here.
Football, like soccer, right?
In football, I mean European. Yeah. Soccer, not American football.
Right.
Yeah, those are the two big sports.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's good to see you being able to explore different parts of the world and still do what you're passionate about. So,
yeah, and like I'm excited too, because I'm hoping to next year get to Dubai and Oman and Bahrain to do the 70.3 circuit, because they really are. It's I think $75 for a plane ticket, plus getting my bike over there. It's super cheap to get around. And then, of course, all the European races. So one could argue or make the case that it's more convenient to race over here than it is back in the States.
Wow. Interesting.
So, yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the sun. I'm enjoying the culture. The food is great. And it's also good to be back as a teacher rather than as a grad student.
Yeah, I'm sure getting a paycheck is kind of nice for a change.
Yeah. Excellent point. Yes. Yes. Very true.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, so we are going to talk today about the get away from the swimming technique and swimming training a little bit and talk about the idea of motivation.
Yeah, and I think this is a great time to talk about it because right now I think people are at a precarious situation with their training because while your races are coming up in May, June, July, August, they're just far enough for you to think to yourself, oh, I can get away with less training, but at the same time, close enough that fear starts to build up that you're not going to have enough time to train for them.
Right.
Like it's that weird time right after the New Year's where you're excited for the races, but at the same time, you've got this fear that you don't have enough time to get all the training that you need to, especially for the swim. When, people are thinking, especially if they're stepping up to longer distances like Ironman and half Ironman, and they've never swum that distance before, it might be daunting almost to the point of not motivating you to get to the pool at the distances that you're going to have to swim and then run after. So motivation at this time of year, it's tricky because if you don't nurture that motivation and if you kind of push yourself too hard, maybe even indulge in that fear too much, you'll burn out very quickly, especially if you've been prepping for this since the fall. I know a lot of people, they finish their season in August, take September off, and then start worrying about races in October. Now you're 4 months in. Some people are actually burning out because they trained too hard back in the fall.
Yeah, I've noticed that this can apply to all parts of life where you feel like you got to do a whole bunch of things and you start to get really deeply involved in them. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you feel this burnout come. And so what would be some of your tips that people could, implement in their lives to, I guess, avoid this idea of burnout and to get back some of that motivation?
And I think it comes down to a lot of people like to blame them, think it's all inside them, their motivation, that it's all if they're not motivated, it's their fault. And that if you wake up and you can't get to the pool, it's 100% your, I guess you could even argue, moral failing that you're not motivated enough to do what it takes. And thinking about what I researched in college, a lot of it had to do with motivational theory and behavioral change theory. And one of the theories that stuck with me was something called self-determination theory. And that says that motivation and enjoyment and success is kind of based off of three basic things. Competence, so how well you feel like you're doing in that sport. So I guess applying this to swimming or triathlon, how competent do you feel at swimming, biking, and running? And if you feel more competent at it, if you have a high self-efficacy, if you feel like you are improving, if you feel like you're good at it, you're going to do more of it. But also, and so that's where a lot of people see motivation arising from is, if you feel good at doing something and feel like you're good at it, you're going to want to do it more. And to some extent, yeah, they're 100% correct. If you enjoy doing something, you want to do more of it. And if you're not good at something or you're frustrated with your lack of improvement and you don't feel confident about it, you don't want to do it. I mean, we've seen this all the time with swimmers is people get frustrated with their swimming abilities and not seeing improvements and continuing to be quote unquote slow, and they give up because they're just sick and tired of not being competent at swimming. But that's only one part of this theory as far as motivation goes. The other two are less related to kind of our own perceptions of the world. And one of them is autonomy. And that's where I think a lot of athletes who are coached by others, that's where they go wrong. And that's where they can lose motivation is if they don't feel that they're in control of their training program, they're going to be less motivated to do it. And this, you might have experienced this also with some swimmers in college or growing up swimming, is that they didn't feel like they had control over their swimming or, the path, their swimming path and their swimming career. So they checked out and became amotivated.
Yeah. Let me interrupt you. Sorry. I got a story that I can totally relate to this, that I totally get what you're saying. And one thing I learned when I was back when I was a competitive swimmer was exactly what you're saying, is that I needed a huge amount of autonomy in terms of my training, because I kind of knew what I needed. And, as you get older, when you're a little kid, you have no idea. So you need a coach to kind of like tell you what to do, when to do it. But then like I got into college and I started learning how I trained and how my body reacted and all that. And I knew what I needed. And the problem was I was forced into a group, like a training group, that I didn't think was what I needed, but I didn't really have a choice. And then I started to feel that burnout and I started to get not so motivated. I was swimming my fastest times ever and I had no motivation to continue. I was going to quit. I was ready to quit swimming. The next year I came back and I was basically like, here's what I want to do, to my coaches, and can I do this? And they're like, yeah, let's do that. So my motivation went through the roof. I all of a sudden loved swimming. I looked forward to going to workouts, to practice, and I just absolutely had a blast. So that's just something to relate to what you're saying.
And I think with like Ironman athletes, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, where autonomy comes into some extent is you feel a pressure that you have to do Ironman races or half Ironman races. You kind of feel this social pressure, whether it's from like social media or from your peers or from your triathlon community, that you got to go long. If you don't go long, you're not a triathlete. And that kind of steals the autonomy away from you. So you don't feel like you're in control of what you want to race. You got to do these races because that's what you got to do. And I guess with pro triathletes, if you listen to their story, you also see that not only in addition to kind of losing control of their training plans from their coaches, they kind of lose their autonomy of what races they want to do. They got to do Kona because that's where the money's at. They got to shoot for Kona because that's what their sponsors want them to do. And with that pressure, they lose their autonomy, and that's where they get burned out. So it's interesting how much autonomy plays into motivation like that.
Yeah, like I know Brad Kearns talks about this a lot with his pro career, where it became a job and then it became like he just stopped enjoying it, where before it was a blast, and then he's getting paid to do these things and he has to show up at certain races that he doesn't want to be at. And then it totally makes sense.
Yeah, it's like autonomy, I think is an underrated part of motivation. And then the last part is relatedness. And that's where feeling, close and affectionate and building relationships with others. And I think this also plays into motivation, because if you feel isolated and alone, you're not going to be as motivated to do it. And as swimmers, because triathlon and swimming is such a quote unquote individual sport, yes, I think we all need to. Your motivation is going to be longer lasting if you have people to share the journey with. And if you know that you've got people who you like being around, who you enjoy being with, going to masters with you, like masters swim practice with you at 5 o'clock in the morning, you're more likely to go out and do that, and enjoy and be motivated to go and, get to the 5 a.m. practice with them. Or if you enjoy being in the triathlon community and showing up to those races because you like being around those people, you're more motivated to do the races and do the training because you know that you're able to, through triathlon and through sport, you're able to interact with people and relate to people on a different level. So when people start to lose motivation and say to me, I'm burned out, like, I don't know if I can do this, I like to step back and let's look at these 3 branches and see where you're lacking. Do you feel like where's your self-efficacy at? Do you feel like you're not competent at swimming, biking, and running? And how can we fix that? Does it take, creating more of an open mindset of enjoying the journey and focusing on one thing at a time? Is it more of an autonomy thing where you feel like you're not in control of your training or your racing? Or are you feeling isolated and alone in this training? Is training actually pushing you away from friends and family, and in that undermining your motivation? So I think if you're starting to feel burnout, more on the psychological level rather than the physical level, because the physical level is completely different. And we talked actually with Brad, speaking of Brad Kearns, we talked about him on a previous podcast with him about, physical burnout and how that can wreak havoc on your career. But this is if you're feeling more mentally fatigued and mentally amotivated and burned out, play around with these 3 things and see, do some soul searching and see, what part aren't you experiencing, whether it's competency, autonomy, or relatedness.
Yeah, there's so many directions we could go with that. It's a really interesting topic. One of the things that came up when you were talking for me was the idea, and you touched on it earlier, but the idea of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Now, can you kind of have a combination of both? Or when it comes to motivation and burnout, would you say that you need to really dig deep inside yourself and figure out what it is? Or is there some level of extrinsic motivation, like external to you, that could help with this kind of thing?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think different things motivate different people. And I think that's 100% fine. Some people are very motivated by the podium, and that's their number one goal, is to win and get on the podium. But some people could care less about placement. They could go out and race themselves all day, and that's where they find their joy. But I think you definitely have to be careful with extrinsic motivation because it's so fragile, because it's so out of your control. Because if you're motivated by performance and getting to the top and being in the top 5 in your age group, or getting to Kona, or winning Kona, or any of these things that are kind of outside of your control, you really don't have control of whether you can do it. Like if you could have the best race of your life, but if everyone else has the best race of their life and they win, being extrinsically motivated, that takes away the joy and experience of having the best race of your life. Right. Because instead of celebrating that you had a wonderful race, you're angry that someone else took that away from you by racing better.
Yeah.
And you had no control over that. So extrinsic motivation, it comes in ebbs and flows, but it's something to be mindful of and be careful with when it comes to motivation. Intrinsic motivation also, that you do have control over, thankfully. Searching from within and saying, this is, finding, and we talked about this with Fit Triathlete program, is, finding your why. Why are you doing that, and tapping into that for your source of motivation.
Yeah. And I think I was just listening to I think it was a podcast about, they were talking about motivation a little bit, and somebody was saying that they wake up every day and they listen to that Simon Sinek TED Talk on why. What is it called? Start with why, or?
The Power of Why.
Power of Why.
No, that's Power of Now. Or is it Power of Why?
I can't remember. I'll look it up and put it in the show notes, but it's a TED Talk by Simon Sinek. And they were saying, like, it's important to every day sort of have some connection to that deep inner why you're doing this, because that will automatically keep your motivation up, because you're not, and it's sort of more on autopilot rather than having to think of like, oh, why am I doing this? Like, you just sort of know throughout your day, like, okay, that's what I'm doing here.
And like, especially like if you're a coach or you're coached by someone, it's important to ask them and ask yourselves, how does this workout fit into the larger picture? If you're doing, strength training, what does that workout have to do with the larger picture, whether it's injury prevention or building up, more neurological connections between the muscles and the brain? Whatever it is, ask why. How does this fit into the larger picture of my training and will get me closer to my goal? Because if you can take it down to that micro level of, this workout will make me better because of X, Y, and Z, and you can focus on that, then you're more motivated to do it. Like if you think about 400-meter IM in the pool, it's a tough set. Mm-hmm. And as a triathlete, you might think, why am I doing this? What does this have to do with the 2.4-mile swim that I have to do in July? But if you break it down and let's say, all right, well, butterfly, that makes me better because it makes me a stronger swimmer and I feel more connected to the water. Or with backstroke, I feel more balanced in the water. Or I'm changing up the muscle group recruitments so that I don't get burned out and burn out my shoulders by just doing freestyle. So that 400-meter IM that seems so daunting before now makes logical sense to do and go after and have fun with, rather than dreading it because you're not connected to it and it's not connected to your overall goals.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that I sometimes struggle with a little bit is knowing when, okay, so sometimes you have a day where you're planning on, especially if you're a triathlete, you're planning, okay, Wednesday is my swim day or whatever. And then you get to Wednesday and you just like, feel like crap I don't want to do anything. I definitely don't want to go to the pool. I don't want to run. I don't want to do anything. I just feel terrible today. But some of those times when I've had that feeling, like I'm even in a bad mood, like I'm like negative, I feel crappy, I don't have any energy, but I sort of just force myself to whatever it is I had planned, like, oh, I'll go to the pool and just maybe I'll just jump in. But then sometimes those days I have like an amazing workout and I can't explain it because I'm like, I was expecting to just get in and be like, okay, I did 100, I'm out, but instead I ended up having like a really good workout. So I guess the question it would be is, when do you, on those kind of days, should you just say, F it, and I'm not doing anything. I'm staying home and I'm going to sit on the couch and watch Netflix. And then when should you just override that feeling or that emotion and just go, nope, I'm going to go do something today?
I don't know of any papers that back this up, but my theory is that the reason why sometimes those are the best workouts is because we go into them without any expectations.
Yeah.
Like going into them and say, I'm just going to do 100 and then I'm out. You go into that workout thinking, I don't really care what my times are. Forget it. I'm just going to do it. I'm not in the mood. So you go into the workout with not these lofty goals of having this perfect workout and then having to live up to those goals. So They become the best workouts because you don't have any expectations going in. But when do you throw in the towel there is like, that's a big question, because at the same, like, you don't know if you're going to have the best workout. And I think that's my rule of thumb is if I still feel like junk after the warm up, then I need to get out.
Yeah.
Like if I still am not feeling it after 500 to 600 meter warm up, nice and easy, no clock, then something is definitely up. Or if it's like the third day in a row where I'm in that funky mood, then something needs to be addressed. But otherwise, I think it could be our mind being afraid of not being able to do the workout.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of undermining of, I don't want to go to the pool. I don't want to go to the pool. I'm just in a junk mood. I'm just going to, Netflix and chill right now. I think it's us being afraid of something.
Yeah.
Whether it's, hitting our times, hitting our splits, not feeling confident in it, not feeling like we're fast or we're good. And I think that's our brain's reaction to that fear and anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I think you're onto something there for sure. And it also goes to the idea of overwhelm. Like I remember just like, it was like a week ago, I had one of those days where I really wanted, I had a gym day scheduled, like it was going to happen that day. And the more the day went on, the less I wanted to go. And I'm like, I absolutely want to get that workout in, but I don't want to go through the motions of doing the workout. And so I just used that mini habits concept and I said, okay, so absolutely don't want to do an hour in the gym, but if I go down there and do one pull-up, like that I can do. And I just felt like giving myself that break and going, forget about the hour, just go to the gym and do one pull-up. And that's it. And then don't have any more expectations. I can do another workout another day. It doesn't matter. And so of course I go to the gym and I do one pull-up and then I'm like, oh, I feel much better than I thought. And then I was there for an hour and I wanted to be there. So the motivation came as I showed up rather than trying to get the motivation first and then go there.
I think our mind goes, well, I'm here. I might as well do a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, once you dive into the pool, well, I'm here. I'm already wet. I'm here. I'm already in the pool. I've got my jammers on. I might as well just do one more lap.
Yeah.
And I think it's the mini habit of showing up that the motivation builds once you get there. And if it doesn't, then something might be up. Something might be up, whether you're getting sick or you're getting cold, or maybe you've been training too much or you've been under fueling. If it doesn't build when you're there, then it might be a deeper issue.
Yeah. And then when would you just say, this is time to take a little break, maybe take a couple weeks or maybe a month or something and just not do anything related to your sport?
If you have 3 days in a row of being kind of out of it, being amotivated, wanting to sleep in, not interested at all, then I will say, like, let's take the rest of the week off, not worry about anything. And if it's still there at the end of the week, then start to say, all right, what are some of the other things going on? Could it be stress outside that's playing a role? Because that plays a huge role in motivation. Like, if you're stressed about your work or your family relationships or like a larger issue, and you have that stress consuming energy in your brain, you're not going to have energy to think about stuff like training. So if that's the case, that you've got bigger issues going on outside of your triathlon life, then you might need to address those first before regaining your motivation in triathlon. So like, when do you need a full month off? I think is if you push past those first 3 days and keep on trying to regain that motivation, trying to have that perfect workout that's going to, snap you out of it. I'll feel better at the end of this week when I get all of my training in, or I have to keep on working out. I can feel better about my training. That's just going to dig the hole even more. Mm-hmm. And if you look at your training log notes and see that you're really inconsistent, where you have a great workout and then a horrible workout, great workout, horrible workout, great workout, horrible workout, then that up and down and that escalation, that's in my mind a red flag that you're not consistently able to put in the work. So you might need extended recovery.
Right. Yeah. And then when you say extended recovery, that doesn't mean sitting on the couch and Netflixing it up, right? It's more like you could switch to another activity. Like maybe it's hiking, maybe it's something that's super not competitive, right?
Take off, do some yoga.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. Go out in nature, get some sun on your face, throw out the Garmin, hop on a mountain bike where you don't have power numbers or you don't have access to power numbers and you can't go fast because you have to worry about the technicality of the trails. Do something unrelated to your A race. That can give you the mental de-stress that your mind might need to kind of sort through all the external stressors so that you're able to regain that energy to put towards your A race and towards those goals that you settled on before.
Yeah, right. One thing that also came to mind, last night, I did a webinar with Chris Ritter, strength training guy, and we had a question that came in, and this woman said, "Oh, I can't even do one push-up. I'm 60 years old, and should I just quit triathlon altogether?" I thought that was kind of funny, and it kind of relates to what we're talking about. Is like she was feeling overwhelmed because he was talking about all these different exercises and showing people doing some pretty hardcore stuff on video, and then she's like, "Well, I can't even do one push-up." So, what do you think about that? Like that level of like kind of overwhelm. Like you could relate it to like someone that says, "Oh, I signed up for a race where I have to swim 500 meters."
I think a lot of people can relate to that in triathlon.
Yeah, because if you can only swim one lap, let's say in the pool, and you sign up for a race that's like 500 meters or something, that's pretty daunting. You can kind of get frozen in your tracks and be like, well, should I even do this?
And it's at that point, it's like, yeah, you could still do your Ironman. You just got to extend the timeline out. If you're really set on an Ironman, but you can't swim a single length, extend that timeline out. You don't have to do it this year. You start small, and kind of realize, I can still hit those goals. It's going to take me longer than 12 weeks.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. When I first started TriSwimCoach, I included training plans for all the distance races except for Ironman. I left that out because I was saying that we're more for the beginner to intermediate level triathlete and that's working on swimming. And I don't recommend doing an Ironman as a beginner. And so I just said, I'm not going to provide the workouts for Ironman. But I had so many requests that I just said, all right, I'll give you guys the Ironman workouts.
Yeah, it's a different beast, especially for a beginner swimmer. So if you really have your heart set, and this goes back to motivation, if you really have your heart set on doing an Ironman, make sure your why of doing an Ironman specifically is strong.
Right.
Because that's going to get you to the pool at 5 o'clock in the morning for those 5,000 meter swims.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So You want to wrap this up and the whole topic of motivation and burnout?
Yeah. So if you're feeling kind of the niggles of being amotivated and starting to not enjoy what you're doing, then don't be too hard on yourself, but kind of go back to thinking about, that competency, autonomy, and relatedness formula and see whether you're lacking in one of those. And if you are, then fix that or work on that and see if your motivation rebounds.
Yeah, I guess, and just to touch on that a little bit more, the being hard on yourself, I think that'll end up digging you into a deeper hole if you just are sort of like punishing yourself or being angry at yourself for missing a workout or whatever it is. I think that just makes things worse and worse and worse. And I know that for sure, being myself competitive with myself and then having all these expectations and then they don't get met. And then it's like, oh, what did I do? What am I doing? And then it gets worse. So I think that's where you need to take a step back and say, okay, how can I enjoy this again?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that wraps it up nicely.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I think that's it. Now, do you have a new website or anything that you want to promote before we sign off?
I don't think so, actually. I've with the new teaching job, I've kind of stepped back less and less from coaching.
Yeah.
So, but if you've got questions, more than happy to talk to you. My email is still chris@TriSwimCoach.com. So if you've got questions about sports psychology or, just want to pick my brain on a couple topics from training to visualization to anything beyond, just send me an email.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And thanks, Chris, for coming on. And it was great chatting again.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to another episode of the TriSwimCoach podcast. If you like this show, consider giving us a 5-star review on iTunes and we'll read it off on the next show. And to get the latest triathlon swimming tips, tricks, blogs, and podcasts, go to TriSwimCoach.com. See you next time. Until then, befriend the water.